Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Samuel Schaefertz. I am the intern here at Forsyth County Extension, and this summer I am doing my work on herbs, and it's a three-part series. The first part, I delve into how to grow and cultivate herbs in your garden here in Forsyth, so stuff that grows well here. This is the second section, and in this section I'm going to take some of those herbs that I mentioned in the previous section and incorporate them into different ingredients, into different recipes. And today our recipe is going to be a soup broth. The herbs that I've highlighted are going to be parsley and bay laurel. And just to go over everything that we need today, our other ingredients we're using is celery, red onion, garlic, cremini or baby bella mushrooms. We're going to be using carrots, Szechuan black peppercorn, olive oil, and kosher salt. We're going to be cooking everything in an electronic programmable pressure cooker. There's many different products out there. Today we're going to be using an Instapot, but you can use just about a variety of these on the market. And we're going to be, you would need a large bowl, because when we use this we're going to be dumping it into something and we're going to be filtering it and we're going to be ladling it, so you would need a ladle as well. And just for safety, there is steam that comes from these things through the steam valve, so in order to not take the precaution to not burn yourself with the steam, you want to use oven mitts. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut our onions and our garlic, because those take quite a bit of time, and then we're going to saute the onion. And while we saute the onion, we can cut up our other vegetables. The onion takes about 3 minutes. So once we put the onions in, it'll take us about that time to cut our other veggies, and then it'll be ready to throw the other vegetables in. So first thing, we're going to cut it on the top in half. Then we're going to cut the tips off on both sides. Discard the scraps. Now I'm removing the papery skin. Alright, so now we're going to not quite dice them, but cut them into long sections. And we won't really be eating this. This will just be used to make the broth, so it doesn't have to be perfect. And I'd say that's good. So now, just to keep all my vegetables in one section, I'm going to throw my onions in here. I'm going to chop the garlic. So I cut the tips off and then I peel the paper. Alright, now we can slice the garlic. When it gets small enough, we don't really need to dice this up because again this is just going in a broth, we're not actually eating the garlic. So that's about chopped fine enough. Now we can go ahead in this recipe, and I'd just like to acknowledge credit that I got this recipe off bonappetit.com by a chef. Her name is Carla Lally Music, and I've adapted the recipe just a little bit so it's not exactly as it was on the website. So this recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of oil. So I'm going to place the oil in the EPPC, or the pressure cooker. And there is a setting for saute, so I'm going to hit that. It's important to leave, I stress that we leave the lid off for saute. If you leave it on, it gets too hot and there's no water to actually pressure cook. So for this saute part of this recipe, we're going to leave the lid off and give it a few minutes to heat up. And while that's going on, we can chop our other vegetables. So we're going to use 2 carrots. And we can cut off the ends. I think I should use mine. Okay, and I usually cut, I'll line up my carrots and then cut them at the same time, just to make it a little quicker. And I'm cutting them about, I'd say, a 1/4 of an inch thick, although, again, I'm just cutting them into smaller bits so that they cook better in the soup. Instead of just throwing a whole carrot in, cutting them up will increase their surface area and you'll get more flavor out of it than if you were to put it in whole. And it calls for 2 stalks of celery. While that's going on, this pressure cooker only takes a few minutes to get going, so I'm going to throw in the onions. Now the onions are going to cook for about 3 minutes by themselves. And I actually forgot my ladle, so I'm going to do the ladle. Mix it every so often. I'm going to start throwing my other vegetables into the bowl. They're going to go in at the same time. And this is just to make room on my cutting board. So for my celery stalks, I cut off the ends on both sides. And I chop them into about 1-inch long pieces. Then we use about a cup of parsley, and now's a good time to check again on the onions. I have a measuring cup here. And this is actually for 2/3 of the cup, so I'm going to use a little bit more. That's good. And parsley is actually easier to chop when it's dry. So if you want to wash it after cutting and put it in a colander, and if you want to cut it first while it's dry and then put it in a colander and wash it, that might be an easier method to take. And that's the method I usually use. These are pre-washed though, and I just set them out to dry. Okay, I'll chop my parsley. My onions are looking good. They're starting to brown on some of their sides. In about 3 minutes, I'm going to toss my other vegetables in. And I actually forgot my mushrooms. So on her recipe, she says that any large mushrooms can get cut in half. I think I'll follow those directions. And the smaller ones can get tossed in whole. And then these are going to cook for about 5 minutes total. Occasional stirring. Alright, now I'm going to have my coworker Barbara Worley come join me, and she is the fax agent here at Forsyth County Extension. Hey Barbara.
Looks like you're making a really good dish today.
I am. We are making bay laurel soup broth base.
Yeah, so it looks like a great stock where you're concentrating some flavors. So I guess when you're putting all the vegetables in whole like you are, like kind of rough chopping everything, and then going to bring them up to pressure, it's creating like a brown stock. So you're really getting all those flavors, and then I guess you're going to be straining them out. Later on in the process. Okay, cool. So what else do you need to do? Looks like you've already got some onion, garlic. Let's see, mushrooms, carrot, and parsley.
And parsley, yep. And I got that going. It's been going, cooking for about 3 minutes, starting to get a little brown.
Okay, cool.
And next...
So this is a bay, I'm going to just throw this behind you. This is a bay laurel stock, you said. So I guess that's going to be the predominant flavor that you're going for. And this stuff is really concentrated. Can you tell me a little bit about the herb? Because you're the herb expert.
I am. And Barbara is our fax and cooking. And actually what we're using today is a electronic programmable pressure cooker, and you have some publications that you can talk about later.
And so this is a product that's really hot on the market, and it has been for a couple of years now, the electronic programmable pressure cookers. Really popular kitchen appliance that helps cook one-pot dishes really, really quickly to help concentrate some of the nutrients and the flavors. And so I do a lot of presentations on how to use these safely in your kitchen, and so I'm really excited that you are using this today to show how you could really highlight the herbs that you've been
and I have to say, it's extremely easy to use.
It is easy.
This is literally my first time using this, any electronic programmable pressure cooker. And it really is easy because you just plug it into a wall and it can transport anywhere.
So you put in
I put in 2 bay laurels, and then the recipe I actually have here, it calls for 1 teaspoon of the Szechuan black peppercorn, but I'm kind of just
And you're just
eyeballing
gonna
it.
eyeball
Yep.
the peppercorns. And as you can see, I guess you're putting, like you said, everything in whole. And so that's why you're not eating this as a soup.
Right.
You're just pulling it together.
Which is why there's like wiggle room for like how I'm slicing all my
exactly.
vegetables.
Yeah,
it doesn't need to be
yeah.
perfect.
And as you're browning it, that's what's really going to concentrate. It's just like when you roast a vegetable, that really imparts that really deep, dark flavor. And so that's why this is a brown stock. And so you're browning those vegetables to really get those deep flavors. And then once you add the liquid and we cut it off the saute mode, you're going to put it on a pressure cook mode. Pressure cook it for what, about 40 minutes or so?
About 40 minutes, yep.
Yeah. And then when it comes off of pressure, we'll show you how to do. There's two types of pressure releases that you can do on these electronic programmable pressure cookers. They can either be manually released, which instantaneously releases the pressure, or they can natural release, which means they come down to pressure naturally, but that also adds to the cooking time. So I think in today's recipe we discussed a little bit earlier that this one we're just going to manually release, and I'll show you how to do that safely when we get to that point.
Right. We're also going to be adding salt, and to answer your...
And I think the salt we're going to do at the end, or does that go? I think that one goes at the end.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Because you want to do salt at the end to taste after you already have the liquid in there.
Right.
So how much liquid are we putting in?
3 quarts.
3 quarts.
And I actually need to go grab a measure.
A measuring cup. So let's see how this is going. That looks really, really great. And you can always, you guys can't see it right now, but there's a lot of brown bits at the bottom of the stock pot here in the pressure cooker.
Is that okay if it gets a little brown?
Yeah, and so that's really great because once you add the liquid and the pressure comes up, all that brownness is going to be absorbed. So.
That's really where the flavor comes from.
And that's exactly, the brown stuff is where the flavor comes from.
And to answer your previous question on bay laurel,
Yeah.
that's one of the herbs I'm cooking with today. The other is parsley. Bay laurel is an herb. It's native to the Mediterranean.
Okay.
It's not in its an ideal environment to grow here, so it can't reach its full, I guess, size because it grows about 50 feet in the Mediterranean. Down here it does grow, but it usually grows better in containers. It doesn't overwinter too well, so it usually needs to be grown in containers and brought indoors during the winter, and it's usually pruned back to about 10 or 12 feet.
Okay.
So it's a nice small size herb that you can grow in containers, and it's really a tree, so it's one of those trees that kind of bonsais.
Right,
It's very
okay.
cool, and it can be eaten or used in dishes either fresh or dried.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I know just even growing up in just so many different recipes, my mom would always put it into soups and stocks and broths and everything. And then you always were like, oh, you got to always take out that leaf before you eat it because that's something you didn't want to bite down into because of the really pungent, deep flavor that it really imparts into whatever.
It's a lot of fiber too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that we're not really made to digest.
Right.
It's not the easiest, but it's great for flavoring soups.
Cool.
And it's one of the few. Do you know any other? And this is a real question. I actually don't know. Do you know any other trees that the leaves are used for flavoring? I know sassafras we use.
Sassafras, but also there's some of the lime leaves are used, especially in some Asian cooking.
Okay.
Like the keeper lime are used. So yeah, I mean that's the first one that comes to mind.
It's just not a
It's not
common
native
thing.
to
Yeah.
here. Yeah. All right, so I guess it's probably about
I
time.
think it's ready to go.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna do
I'll
this.
come around the other side and I'll go ahead and so you want to cut the saute off now, and then you're going to go ahead and add that liquid.
This is 1 quart. I'm gonna add 2 more cups. This measures only 1 quart. And that should cool it down almost immediately.
Yeah, and I'm going to go ahead and
Yeah,
set this. Oh, move this back down here. Okay, I'll go ahead and set this for you. And I already had it set on 40
And
minutes.
you want to show them how to
from
put the
earlier.
top on and
Yeah, for sure. So we had it set on manual, which is the pressure cook mode for 40 minutes. And we're going to put the lid on, which is always a fun thing to do. You have to get it on just right. It's never an easy feat. And then always make sure that this is straight ahead or whatever type of appliance you have, because all these are a little bit different to where it can come to pressure. And when it comes to pressure, this little red button at the back that you probably can't see will pop up, and that means that it's under pressure. And then once that starts, the 40-minute countdown will start. So I guess we will see you back here in 40 minutes.
Yeah. All right, so it's been cooking for about 40 minutes, and we're about ready to release the pressure and open it up, and we're going to strain it into a bowl. So why don't you tell us, Barbara, a little bit about safely releasing it?
Yeah, so as you can tell, the timer just went off. And so there's two ways that the pressure can be released from an electronic programmable pressure cooker such as this. And you always want to follow whatever the recipe calls for. And so in the recipe today that we were using, it said for us to manually release the pressure. Sometimes it might say for the pressure to be naturally released. And so when the pressure is naturally released, that means that the unit that you're using is going to actually come down from the pressure that it's come up to naturally, obviously, since it is naturally released, which will then enable the lid to be taken off. If we manually release the pressure, that means that we're doing a quick release, that we are forcing the pressure out of the cooker, which can cause some safety issues if you're not careful. And so there's a proper way to do it. First of all, you never want to stand directly over it, because you have a vent steam area right here, that a large amount of steam is going to come flying up when we do release the pressure, and it could cause burning on your face. Another thing that you want to be cognizant about too is you want to make sure that your hands are protected, because when you do release the pressure, you don't want to receive any burn. So I always encourage people, when they do manually release pressure from one of these units, that they cover their hand using an oven mitt of some sort, or even just a kitchen towel. So the best way, because I don't want to do it this way, because then my hand is actually facing over the vent, I'm going to come around and always face the front of the unit to do so. And then I've got to take it off, the lid off anyway. So as you can see, it was in the sealing position here. So I'm just going to simply turn it to the side to where it can release its pressure naturally. And you can see all of that steam is really coming out. Once all of that steam has released, the little red button that has still popped up in the back will start to slowly descend and come down, because that's showing that it is locked, because it's still under pressure. And so once the pressure has deflated, essentially just like a deflated balloon, that will go down, and we will know that the lid is able to come off. If I tried to take the lid off right now, I wouldn't be able to.
Right.
And we can actually go ahead and turn the unit off as well, because it's no need for the heating element to stay on at this point.
And is this safe to cook on different surfaces? Does it get hot underneath? It doesn't.
No, it doesn't get hot underneath. So it's well insulated. All of these units, despite whatever brand it is, they're well insulated on the outside. The heating element is on the bottom, but it's on the inside of the unit. So these are perfectly safe to keep on your counter. What we do warn against when I do teach my classes on food safety and safe use of these appliances, regardless of what model you have or what brand you have, is that you don't utilize this underneath the cabinet. So if you have kitchen cabinets on your counter, you wouldn't want to have this underneath, because when the pressure does release, as you're seeing, then you're going to see the steam and the hot air escape, and then that can cause some damage underneath any kitchen counters that you might have. So that's something to keep in mind. You do want to keep it out in an open area so the heat can escape.
Okay.
Another safety precaution that you're going to want to use, that we'll show in just a second, is when you take the lid off. And when you take the lid off, you're always going to want to turn it and take it off away from you. And so when I do that, I'll have you step to the side, Sam, because you never want to turn the lid towards you, because if there's any hot liquid that could splash, it could splash onto you. Plus, there's going to still be some big release of steam, just like if you were opening a normal stock pot. And you don't want that unwanted facial that you're not getting from a spa from,
exactly.
from the pressure cooker. But it did cook for quite a long time. It cooked for 40 minutes under pressure and then took quite a while to come up to pressure. The total time was almost an hour for this stock, for this bay laurel stock. And so thus it's taking quite a long time to come down to release its pressure. Okay, so it has now come down from the pressure because the red button has come all the way down. And so as I mentioned before, because the red button has released, that means that all the pressure has released. So to safely take the lid off, we're simply going to turn it to the open position, which now that the pressure has released, it should be easy to do. If I had tried to do that before, we wouldn't be able to. And when we lift it, we're going to lift it away, because you see all that steam that was just escaping, hopefully. And then plus this allows any liquid condensation that might be on the inside of the lid to drip down into the contents of the pot. And then you can see
wow, that looks awesome.
Good job there.
We could thank the both of us.
Sam,
that was
so
awesome.
what I'm going to do is, do you want me to pour or do you want to pour?
I'll pour it.
Okay. So you might want to use both, because this, another safety precaution too, is this inside liner here, because the whole contents have been under pressure, this has been really, really hot. So there's two methods that could be used, because all of these solids are going to have to be strained out, right? And so we're just using a strainer. You can also use a colander. That's why it's best to sort of, with a stock like this, keep things whole. So you want to have something that's not very big, because we're just trying to get the stock out. So you can either pull that insert out, but remember it's going to be hot and it's going to be heavy, and if you don't have a lot of hands in the kitchen to hold your strainer, that might be cumbersome, or you could just use a ladle. And so I think that's what we're going to do right now.
I'm going to ladle it in there.
Just ladle it right into the strainer.
I'll be wary of not pouring any hot liquid on Barbara.
Yes, please don't.
And this is a great color too. Is the soup in a good shot? Do I need to move it back so they can see?
Yeah, so the stock. So a lot of people are probably wondering, so Sam, I'll pose this question to you, because I know the answer, but what would you do with all of these now beautifully cooked vegetables?
Well, they're so beautiful, it'd be a shame to waste them.
Right, and I really despise food waste as well. And so, is it okay to eat these vegetables? Of course it is. So you could totally use these vegetables right now.
Can you put them back in the soup?
You could.
Or even eat the soup as it is, as a finished product without
yeah, so
straining?
what we've done by making this a stock is, stocks are a base. Stocks and broths and bouillons and so forth are a base for so many different dishes. You know, you buy it so many times in your local grocery to use in so many different recipes. So we have just made one, and we'll just pause here for a second so you can grab another bowl that we can put the discard vegetables in, which are technically not going to be discarded. Sure. But if you wanted to use some of these vegetables with some of the stock right now to have just kind of a rough vegetable soup, you could. Or you could use some of these vegetables you know, over some rice or something else that you had. I know that in one of the follow-up recipes that you're going to make, you're going to be making a coriander rice, and so some of these would be beautiful perhaps over that rice. So, you know, because we really do want to reduce food
I might
waste.
actually do that. In my next video I was going to make a coriander rice dish.
Yeah.
And Barbara, that is a tremendous idea. I'm going to use this as a good probably gravy, or as like a topping.
Yeah.
For the rice.
Yeah, so, you know, you can always use those, or, you know, if you had like a roast that you've cooked, you know, have those along with the roast. I mean, they're already cooked, and so you already have a great melange of cooked vegetables that you could use for something else. But what the purpose of this recipe was today was to show how you could use the herbs that you were highlighting there, Sam, to make a great stock. And stocks are so versatile rather, for so many different purposes.
Yeah.
And it's always nice to know what you're putting in your stock. that you have, and this is easy to freeze because we always use it in so many different things.
Yeah, we can use it at home for so many different things.
Because I know it seems like every time I'm making a recipe, it's like, oh, use chicken stock or vegetable stock or beef stock.
And usually we just go and buy it at a store.
Right, like in the canister or the carton, right? Or even the can, so.
This is homemade stuff, so.
Right. And then you can season it and flavor it however you wish.
And there's some more in here. Might be hard with the ladle, so.
Yeah, so you can always just pour the rest too.
For the rest of this, you know, I might just.
Yeah. Let me apparently grab this just for a second. I'll empty this, and then for the rest of it, now that it's not as heavy, you can probably just pick up that insert and
just be extremely careful.
just be very careful. It's very warm.
I'm going to move this.
Yeah.
And do you want to?
Here, do you want me to do it? You want to hold? Why don't
Sure.
let's trade places
Let's
here.
trade places. I like that idea. I'll take the liability.
Trading places.
with my hands.
There we go. I promise I'll be careful.
Barbara here is an expert pourer, though, so I'm not worried.
I am an expert pourer.
Let's see.
Perfect. And there's
That looks great.
some more, like the peppercorns and so forth are at the bottom, but we aren't going to be eating those necessarily, so
Yeah,
we can
let's-
just discard those later.
Also, now's a good time to mention to use the right size strainer.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's best to use something like a small mesh strainer. Now, if you don't have that available in your kitchen, just a colander like you would strain your pasta would be fine in, but just keep in mind that you're then going to have to cut your ingredients to size because you don't want them
and those
to come...
peppercorns are really what you gotta.
Right, and so if you were utilizing peppercorns, you just want to make sure that whatever your whole size is in your colander or your strainer is going to be smaller than whatever your ingredients are that you're putting in your stock.